Welcome to another episode of Pirkei Avot. Bezrat Hashem, we are now going to start the 6th chapter and the first Mishna, and we dedicate this episode in memory of Levy ben Moshe Esther and Elisheva Yael bat Leah Levy, and also in memory of Avi Mori Yehuda ben Moshe Esther. I'm going to hand you over to Michael.
Thank you, Rabbi Shiach. So this Mishnah, the first Mishnah of the 6th Perek, we are going to learn the words of Rabbi Meir. And first of all, who was Rabbi Meir? He was a central figure of the 4th generation of Tanaim. According to the Talmud, he was a descendant of the Roman Caesar Nero. His wife, Beruria, daughter of Rav Chanina ben Tradion, was famous in her own right. She was very learned and was frequently mentioned in the Talmud. Rabbi Meir's colleagues and students were in awe of him. The great Rabbi Yehuda Anossi attributed his own success in Torah study to having viewed Rabbi Meir, and I quote from the back, and I further quote, had I viewed him from the front, I would have achieved much more. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda Anossi about Rabbi Meir. We learn this in Eruvin 13 on the base. Rabbi Meir's brilliance was of such a magnitude that most of his colleagues were unable to understand him fully, in spite of a heavenly proclamation that he had no equal in his generation. The halacha does not follow his opinion. He was ordained both by Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, and was among the 5 disciples of Rabbi Akiva who rebuilt the tradition after the tragic decimation of Rabbi Akiva's 24,000 students. He was an accomplished halachist and homileticist, and he devised a successful formula for public speaking, which was he would speak 1/3 halachic content, 1/3 homiletics, and 1/3 illustrative stories and parables, which kept his audiences spellbound. This is recorded in Yerushalmi Sota, chapter 1:4. His opinions play a major role in the compilation of the Mishnah. The Talmud attributes Mishnayos of anonymous authorship to Rabbi Meir in the name of Rabbi Akiva. The attributions, and I quote, others say, is in fact his opinion. This relative anonymity was the price he paid for his role in the controversy regarding the respective roles of Nasi and Av Beis Din, in which he sided with the Rav Nosson against Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. The primacy of Torah study in his worldview is mirrored in many of his maxims. I quote some of his famous ones, one of his most famous is this Mishnah, where he says, one who engages in Torah study for its own sake merits many things. And also, anyone who lives in a city with a study hall but does not attend it has no share in the world to come. That's from Avot to Rav Nosson 36. According to him, Torah accomplishment is of greater significance than the most exalted lineage. A mamzer, who is a Torah scholar, takes precedence over an ignorant Kohen Gadol. Emphasizing the teaching of Torah as an enhancement of Hashem's honor, he condemned those with the ability to teach that but refused to do so, saying that they degraded the word of Hashem. Nonetheless, he advocated that one should teach his child a clean trade and pray for his livelihood, for no trade guarantees wealth without Hashem's blessing. So let's have a look at this Mishnah and see what it says. Rabbi Meir Omer, Rabbi Meir said, Kol ha'osek b'Torah lishma zocher ledvarim harbe. Whoever occupies himself with the study of Torah merits many things. V'lo od, and not only that, ela shekol ha'olam kulo kedai hu lo. But the entire world is worthwhile because of him. Nikra Rea, he is called a friend, Ahov, beloved, Ohev et hamokom, one who loves Hashem, Mesameach et habrios, one who loves mankind, Ulbashto anava v'yira, he brings joy to the omnipresent God, and joy to man, Umachshauto lios tzaddik, chosid yasha, and joy to mankind. The Torah clothes him with humility and reverence, and prepares him to be righteous. Yashav Ne'eman, to be righteous, pious and upright and faithful. Or merachto min hachet, and it puts him far from sin. Or mekravto lidei zuchut, and brings him near to virtue. V'nehnim mimenu atza v'tushia, and people enjoy from him the benefits of counsel and sound wisdom. Bina, understanding, or gvura, and strength. Shenema, as it is stated in the name of in the Torah, Li etza v'tushia, mine are counsel and sound wisdom. Ani bina, I am understanding. Li gvura, and might is mine. V'notenet lo malchut o memshala, and it gives him sovereignty and dominion. V'chiko din, and penetrating judgment. U'megalim lo rozei Torah, to him are revealed mysteries of the Torah. V'na'aseh kamanyan hamisgaber v'chanha she'eno posek, and he becomes an ever-flowing fountain and a river that doesn't run dry. V'hoves nuah v'orech ruach, he becomes modest, forbearing, or mochel al albono, and forgiving of insults, or magdalato, or romamto al kol hamaasim, and it makes him great and exalted above all creations. So Rabbi Meir is giving a very comprehensive list of the attributes of a Talmud Chacham, a person who devotes himself to the study of Torah, how his relationship to Hashem, his relationship to mankind, and his attributes and virtues, and what he offers in terms, he offers people the benefits of counsel and understanding, and also to all around him he achieves a kind of sovereignty and dominion because of his understanding. And to him are revealed mysteries of Torah, and he's like an ever-flowing fountain, and he's exalted. So a great description of someone who devotes himself to Torah study. So I'm going to use today the commentary of Irving Bunim in his classic Ethics of Sinai, as I think it gives some very valuable sources to analyze this fantastic Mishnah. So we'll start. So the study of Torah, says Rabbi Meir, has value only for its own sake. You must cherish it for itself as an intrinsic good, and don't use it as a means to achieve something else. The word lishma literally means to its name, stemming from the root hora, to instruct. Torah's name signifies teaching. Study Torah that it may teach you. Open your heart and mind to its inspiration and let it form the pattern of your life. So let's take apart individual statements from this Mishnah. We begin with the quote, "Whoever occupies himself with the study of Torah for its own sake merits many things." So Rabbi Meir finds no need to enumerate these things. The written Torah itself mentions various rewards. We learn in Proverbs 3:16 to 18, King Solomon sums it up, and I quote, "Long life is in her Torah's right hand. In her left are riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. A tree of life is she to those who grasp her, and fortunate are all who uphold her." End quote. In the deeply felt words of the Midrash, I quote from Seder Eliyahu Rabbah, chapter 4, any scholar who studies the Torah every day, continually, in order to greaten the glory of heaven, needs neither sword, lance, spear, nor anything to protect him, for HaKadosh Baruch Hu alone protects him. Also, the Talmud records in its own words, this is from Sanhedrin, Daf 99 Amud Beis, whoever engages in the study of Torah for its own sake brings peace to the angelic household in the supernal realm and the human household here below. Rav said it is as though he builds Hashem's palace of the supernal realm and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's terrestrial palace here below. Also, Rabbi Yochanan said he also protects the entire world. So many proofs of the effects of studying Torah. Let's look at the morning prayers, Shacharis. We include a Mishna in the tractate of Peah, and I quote from that Mishnah. These are the things of which a man enjoys the fruits of in this world, while the principal reward remains for him in the world to come: honouring father and mother, doing deeds of loving kindness, attending the Beis HaMidrash on time for prayer, morning and evening, granting hospitality to wayfarers, visiting the sick, providing for marriage to the poor brides, accompanying the dead to the grave, devotion in Torah, and making peace between man and his fellows. But the study of the Torah is equal of them all. About this Mishnah, the Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman asked a strong question. Every mitzvah listed in the Mishnah that we just mentioned, except the last, when it is fulfilled, achieves two effects at the same time. Heaven's will is obeyed, and there is an immediate social benefit. People are helped through these good deeds. But when the last mitzvah is observed, when a person studies Torah, he may gain from it, and heaven may benefit. But how does it help your fellow man? Then why does the Mishnah in our morning prayers call it the equal of all the others listed, the previously listed mitzvot taken together? The answer, continues our Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman, lies in Rabbi Meir's teaching. When anyone, old or young, studies the Torah for its own sake, he makes the whole world worthwhile. He justifies and assures its existence. So the social benefit to all mankind far outweighs the individual aid given through the other mitzvot. King Solomon summed up his entire philosophical quests as we read Sof Davar HaKol Nishma Yura Ve'etz Misosov Yura Kizeh Kol Adam. The end of the matter is, everything having been heard, fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole of man. And Rabbi Elazar adds, said HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the entire world was created only for this. While Shimon ben Azai phrased it, the entire world was created only that this might be decreed. And now let's move on. We learned previously in Pirkei Avot, I think it was chapter 3, Mishna 7, that if any number sit and study Torah together, be it 10 or 2, the Shekhinah, or divine presence, dwells in their midst. So too does the world become worthwhile, justified on account of anyone who studies Torah for its own sake. Metaphorically, he lights a candle in a world of spiritual night to let some added measure of godliness dwell here on earth, bringing a little closer the time when divine illumination will reach everywhere. We know that Vilna was holy because the Vilna Gaon and other great scholars learned there. Radun acquired holiness because the Chofetz Chaim lived there. HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised, and I quote from Exodus 3:5, in every place where I will have my name mentioned, I will come to you and I will bless you. The Torah and its study are portable. It can be transported and transplanted. In the wilderness, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moses, again from, I think it's Shemot, the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And I think because that was where Moshe was about to receive the Hashem's words. Also, I think in the fields of where Avraham bought the burial plots, he elevated the ground of Ephron. Am I right? The field of Ephron. It actually said the ground was elevated, was lifted. That's also an indication of how you make things holy. Let's look further at other concepts within this Mishnah, and I quote where it says, "He is called one who loves HaKadosh Baruch Hu and one who loves mankind." He is called a friend and beloved. This is what it says in the Mishnah. So how can you love a creator when you don't see him at all? What you have to do then, says Rabbi Meir, is study Torah lishma, for its own sake. As the Midrash puts it, the Torah is the blueprint of creation, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu created when he formed the world. So the more Torah you study, the more you learn of the amazing intelligence, design, benevolence and worth in nature and the great meaning behind human existence. With pure Torah study comes an appreciation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's concern and love for man. We get to know ever more about Hashem and his world. Then inevitably, if imperceptibly, our love for him must grow. Torah brings this reciprocal love into being by exalting man's vision. The Torah becomes a growing awareness of the divinity that created the world and imbued it. As sacred study continues, a bond of communion with this divinity forms as a bond of love. Then, by degrees, the devout person's interests and attachments lift from the delusive goals of this earth. He overcomes and renounces the various evils of human character which shut out the Shekhinah. Jealousy, lust, and a search for honor. What goals can they win him in a comparison with the divine affection that he has come to know? His interest fades in the pursuit of wealth for its own sake. Torah opens a new dimension of experience to him, and he can be happy with his lot, not envying others for what they have. Because with its study he disciplines his passions and controls his appetites, and his desires will not run amok and ruin his life. With its study he learns humility and flees honor like the plague. So, furthermore, pure Torah learning brings fulfillment of our obligation as men and those of Jews. Then we can find happiness around us. All will appear beautiful, and the very atmosphere will seem filled with gladness and hope. As it is quoted in Tehillim, and I quote from chapter 96, 10 to 12, "Let the heavens be glad, and let the earth rejoice. Let the sea roar, and all that fills it. Let the field exult, and everything in it. Then shall all the trees of the wood sing for joy." Let's look at another quote from the Mishnah. "It clothes him, malbashto, with humility and reverence." I'm going to quote now from Ruach Chaim of Chaim of Volodin. He makes a very good point. He says it is clear from the Talmud that glima means a cloak, an outer garment worn only out of doors or when a respectable appearance is needed, while livush denotes an ordinary garment like a shirt, worn constantly as a matter of course. The verb malbashto, from the same root as levush, would then imply that with pure Torah study, humility and reverence become not a pose to be assumed for the sake of a distinguished appearance, but a constant integral part of the persona, the self that a person forms and maintains in meeting and dealing with the world around him. Through the chemistry of Torah, these traits become an inseparable part of his nature. If I can quote also from Midrash Shmuel, he says that a man can maintain a humble attitude as a form of pious behavior, yet believe himself superior to many others. Such humility is of little worth. Our Chachamim reckon conceit the equal of the worst sins, and they add, of an arrogant person, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "I and he cannot both dwell in this world." It's from Sota 4b. As Torah reveals truth, it removes the foundations of conceit, the inflated notions a man may have about himself. Torah reduces the individual to his true size whilst restoring those around him to their true stature. So is humility born amid reverence. And to quote further in the Mishnah, it prepares him, machshavto, to be righteous, pious, upright, and faithful. The Torah will not automatically make a person righteous or pious overnight by some magic alchemy, but it can prepare him for these qualities. It can subtly, gradually influence and alter his character to predispose himself to piety and faithfulness. The word machshauto has the same root as kosher, kasher, which generally means fit for intended use. If an animal is declared kosher, amongst other things, it must mean that the animal had no disease or abnormality. It was healthy. Similarly, Torah study makes a person fit for character development by eliminating spiritual maladies and sinful tendencies. And to further quote from the Mishna, and I quote, "It puts him far from sin and brings him near to virtue." So we are aware that we can't shut ourselves out from the world around us. We have to remember the Torah's words, "You shall not follow after your heart and after your eyes." Sin may tempt you, but you don't have to follow after it. You don't have to welcome it or dwell upon it or explore any possibilities. The beginning of sin, says Chachamim, is the heart's cogitation. We are also we are faced by the Yetzer Hara when the heart is seized with bad thoughts. Therefore, the Chachamim advise, if this repulsive degenerate, kind of Satan or the tempter or the Yetzer Hara encounters you, you should drag him into the Beis HaMidrash, in the house of study. If he is stone, he will be dissolved. If he is iron, he will be shattered to smithereens. This we learn in Gemara Sukkah 52 Omid Beis. The strongest temptation will not survive in an atmosphere of Torah. It is said you must fight fire with fire. And we also, if I can reference now, the how much Torah removes a man from sin, I quote from the book of Psalms. As far as the east is from the west, so far has He, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, removed our transgressions from us. The distance between east and west is not a yard or a mile or 100 miles. Between them doesn't lie a distance at all, but a change of direction. When a man faces east, he need only turn around to face west. This is what Torah study does for you. It changes the direction of your life. You leave sin behind and move towards Hashem. So does it keep you far from sin. As the poet wrote, I think it was Rudyard Kipling, east is east and west is west, and never the twain shall meet. Furthermore, from the Mishnah, I quote, people enjoy him, this is the Talmud Chacham, people enjoy from him the benefit of counsel and sound wisdom, tushiyah, and understanding and strength. So if you spend enough time involved in Torah study, you become now an instrument for the community. Don Isaac Abarbanel, the word etzah, counsel, has an ordinary meaning of advice in social and political matters. Tushiyah, sound wisdom, denotes sharpening of the mind. To teach it to grasp quickly what practical course should be taken in a given instance. Binah, the understanding, signifies the ability to reason and deduce, to arrive at a correct conclusion from what you know. As for Gvura, Don Abarbanel refers to it as being an allusion to war or strategy and advice about its conduct, as this is mentioned separately. For in war, sound advice and strategic planning are usually the deciding factor. The Hasidic Rabbi Yehuda Aryeh of Ger, in his Svat Emet, connects Tushiyah and Tash, weakening. Even if in such dire straits where a man is too weak and helpless to rescue himself, the student of Torah will find a solution. The main point, as Don Abarbanel concludes, is that pure Torah study in concentration and devotion will not make a person a hermit in an ivory tower, or as blind as a newborn child to the ways of the world. It will rather endow him with a fine wisdom in human nature and human affairs, to guide others with the sure and practiced hands. It might be added that Don Isaac Abarbanel is perhaps himself the proof. He was a profound theologian and a student of the Torah, whose commentaries and writings are studied intensely today. He was a valued advisor to his king, so much so that when all Jews were expelled from Spain in 1492, the king asked him to remain, offering him special royal permission, but Don Isaac chose to go with his people. Also quoted in the Mishna, it says, and it gives him sovereignty and dominion. I think it was Chofetz Chaim once said that when he was young he wanted to rule the world. Soon realizing this was impossible, he reduced his dream to his own country. This also beyond his reach, he decided he would rule his own city. Failing in this as well, he determined to reign over the members of his own family. Even that he was not able to command, and he finally worked to attain a royal mastery of his own soul. That he achieved, and thus he realized he held the greatest power of all. But the Talmud Chacham has sovereignty beyond his inner life. To those about him in the authentic community, Jewish community, he is a figure of respect and authority, and especially to his students if he becomes an educator, almost like he ranks as a king. Thus the Talmud recounts of Rabbi ben Nachmani, the head of the Torah Academy in Pumdita, that Melech, he reigned for 22 years, and then Rabbi Yosef reigns. This is from Gemara Brachot 64 Amud Aleph. For, as Rav Isaac of Toledo writes, there is no greater empire than the Torah. Hence, the Talmud states that in general, masters of Torah are called kings. And regarding another quotation, discerning judgment. The Torah, the Talmud Chacham has the ability of Hikor Hadin. He offers immediate advice. He is able to search and penetrate into principles behind the Torah's laws, and he finds correct answers. Not only does he know the Torah, he can think according to the Torah. The phrase Hikor Adin also recalls the words of Shimon ben Shetach in an earlier Mishnah. I think it was the first Perek, Mishnah 9, and I quote, be increasingly thorough, lahakar, in examining the witnesses. Our text could well signify that the true scholar masters this ability. The oral Torah will have taught him to think clearly and rigorously, to follow without faltering through long, detailed, complicated debates and arguments, and to seek relentlessly after final conclusions and ultimate truth. Should a din Torah or Jewish civil suit be brought before him for adjudication, he will face the witnesses capably and with a trained mind. So this discerning judgment, as the Mishnah says, is his capacity to search and examine and find answers to new questions and new problems. The Talmud Chacham makes his own contribution to the continuity of Torah as a vital source. And furthermore, in the Mishnah, it talks about the mysteries of the Torah are revealed to the Talmud Chacham. So we know that the word of the Torah is interpreted on four levels. There's firstly the Peshat, the plain meaning; the Remez, the allegorical or metaphoric meaning; Drush, the elusive or connotative; and Sod, the esoteric or kind of hidden. The fourth is the deepest level, which is dealing with Sithrei Torah, which are the secrets and Razei Torah mysteries. Rav Chaim of Volozhin, in his Ruach Chaim, puts it very well, and I quote, in truth, all the secrets and mysteries of the Torah are clear and patently visible, but our eyes are covered and cannot see. Even in the Torah's open, unhidden matters, a man may sometimes struggle over a small, simple thing, and when he grasps it, he stands wondering at himself, why did he toil so hard? It is so simple. Yet at times a man is afflicted with a blindness, and when he engages in Torah study for his own sake, HaKadosh Baruch Hu lifts the veil from his eyes, and all the Torah's mysteries are revealed to him. And Rav Chaim continues in Ruach Chaim, they're talking about King David, who asks, and I quote, "Unveil my eyes that I may behold wondrous things out of your Torah." This is from Psalms 119, verse 18. And in our morning prayers, just before the Shema, we ask Hashem, "O Father, merciful Father, who art compassionate, be compassionate to us and inspire our hearts to understand and be enlightened, to hear, learn and teach, keep and do and maintain all the words of the Torah with love, and grant our eyes illumination in your Torah." And looking further on in the Mishnah, it says, "And he becomes as an ever-flowing fountain and as a river that never runs dry." So, as we know, the river's waters that generally comes from other sources such as springs and melting snows or mountains or accumulated rains. A fountain or spring is itself a source. Analogously, there are two types of Torah scholars. In the creative student, learning, wisdom, insight spring forth and bubble constantly. The other type is not as creative, but his encompassing memory gathers files, integrates Torah from many sources. The Talmud calls a creative scholar Okeh Harim, an uprooter of mountains, for so can his keen, effervescent mind treat the Torah's concepts and teachings. And the one with the encyclopedic memory, the Talmud calls Sinai, even as though the Torah was given there so it can be found in his mind. In studying Torah for its own sake, says our text, you become both in time. And further on in the Mishnah, it talks about, it says, he becomes modest. The Talmud Chacham becomes modest, forbearing, and forgiving of insult. So these are refinements of his character and control over his self and his character. So by his nature, the spirit that permeates the Torah must make a man humble and patient. The more he understands of its depths and infinite greatness, the more insignificant and humble must he become in his own eyes. There was I think it's a 16th century work, which is, I think it's from Tome Dvorah by Rav Moshe Cordovero, who was a pupil of Rav Yosef Karo and Rav Solomon Alkavetz. He lived in Safed and he taught Kabbalah, and he quotes, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is an insulted sovereign who suffers humiliation far beyond human imagination, for certainly nothing is hidden from his watchful vision, and there is never a moment when a man is not nourished and maintained by a supernal energy which flows to him. Then never did a man sin towards him, Hashem, at a time when Hashem was not providing for the man's existence and ability to function. And still, though the man sins with that energy, he does not restrain him at all, but bears the insult, and yet supplies energy and grants the man his favor. So great words there from Rav Moshe Cordovero. And lastly, I believe there is the quote from the Mishnah, and it makes him great and exalted above all things. We learn in Rabbi Yehuda Halevi's book, the book of Kuzari, there was a dialogue between a king and a Jewish scholar to explain the nature and tenets of Judaism. The fourth principle of his system of faith, says the scholar, is the recognition that existent entities are of higher and lower level. Whatever has feeling, perception and awareness is of a higher rank than any organism which lacks these qualities. The least of plants is of a higher rank than the most developed of minerals. The least of animals ranks higher than the most developed plants. The lowest human being is on a higher level than the most distinguished animal. Even so does the lowliest adherent of the Torah rank above the most distinguished heathen who has no divine Torah. So this lies implicit in our Mishnah. Above the four levels among created entities, inanimate, vegetable, animal and human, the Torah elevates its devoted students to a fifth level. Unlike the Hegan and Pathan, he has begun to understand and fulfill some of the Creator's plans and hopes for man. In keeping with the Torah, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you shall be holy, for I am holy. So man enters a realm of sanctity above all orders of being. So that's what it means, and it makes him great and exalts above all other things. And I think that will conclude the first Mishnah of this 6th chapter.
Very good. That's a great inspiration for us to learn Torah Lishma for its own sake. Okay, wonderful. So with that, we conclude this week's episode, and next time we convene, Bezrat Hashem, we're going to be doing the Mishnah about Rabbi ben Levy, and with that, we wish you a wonderful and blessed week.